Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni and today in the studio I have a returning guest, Holly Copeland.
Thank you, Einav.
Holly,
it's so wonderful to be back.
Welcome.
I really appreciate the invitation.
Awesome. Well, you have so many new things, so it was just appropriate that we called you back to share some of that. But before we get started with the actual conversation, I'd like to read your bio so that people are on the same page. So Holly Erin Copeland is an author, speaker, and former ecologist turned guide to the wild within. Through her work in inner rewilding, she is on a mission to reconnect humanity with the wild intelligence of being. Her book, Inner Rewilding, A Scientist's Journey into Being, offers a path forward, awakening humanity to the truth that our inner landscapes and outer world are not separate, but one living whole. Drawing from her work on the front lines of conservation and her deep spiritual practice, Holly speaks and teaches from lived experience at the intersection of science, spirituality, and planetary healing. She lives among the oaks in Nevada City, California, where she sings to the land, listens to the trees, and celebrates the beauty of this wild, precious life. How awesome. And I love it. It's really so already really pulling us in, right? And already set the pace of very calm and deep breathing and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about you. I mean, we said so many things in this bio.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Where would you like to start?
Where would I like to start? You know, I would love to start with maybe what people are feeling right now and go from there. And I would love to start with talking about this disconnection that people feel from the land and from the earth and how we reclaim that. And as I discovered in the story that I tell in my book is that that journey, it's so much deeper than just like spending time in nature, you know, although that's a beautiful and practice, and I certainly recommend it, to really see that this is about an intimacy with ourselves in a deeper way, and learning to embrace those connections with within as we build, and as we do that and reconnect to the landscape and to the lands and start listening to the lands in a deeper way. So not just being out in them, but like very intentionally starting to listen to the earth, the plants, and use that as a path forward to start to build an intimacy with her, which is rebuilding an intimacy with ourselves.
And I'm very curious on where you started to realize that there was a disconnect, and then actually going within and going through this journey of rediscovering. Where did that start?
Yeah, it's so funny because as I tell in kind of the last chapter of my book, I thought I was connected to the earth. You know, I lived actually kind of just outside of town in a little town in Wyoming. People would actually on the outside say I was very earth connected. You know, I had a job where I was saving the planet. But I realized that I was still going through the motions of living a busy Western life, right? I was still like, you know, running to my, to my gym in the morning and kind of hustling my kids off to school and just doing a lot of a busy life that didn't include like a deeper time to reconnect within. And so that path started by meditating, actually, by starting to do that inner work of listening within, and then ultimately, you know, and as it's continuing to unfold now for me in my life, how do I even listen deeper to the land and to the cycles of nature? You know, I'm like really deeply interested in astrology and looking at kind of the way that the rhythms of the stars and the moon and the cycles of nature are kind of we're embedded in that and how that influences our day-to-day life. And so starting to just attune to that in deeper and deeper ways. But I guess at the beginning, I just want to say that it's like on the outside, it might look like I was connected, but what I realized was that connection needed to infiltrate all the ways of my daily life and not just living in a place embedded in nature, right?
I think it's interesting what you're saying, because first of all, of course, you started with talking about the disconnect, and then you mentioned the land and the calling to go deeper within, and as I was, reading a little bit about you and your website and stuff like that, and I was thinking to myself, yes, people at the moment, I mean, I completely agree, people are so lost because, there's things that are coming in from so many directions. There's politics and this craziness of this world, and then of course it's slightly closer to home, and if we're now also even talking about the land, in a lot of places we feel like it's already, is it clean and pure like it maybe used to be, or is it now, can you trust the land? So it's very interesting how you make all the connection, and just wondering what you think about that.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I want to focus in on this last statement, like the land being clean and pure, and I know this you're actually touching on the heart of inner rewilding, because my pain going into this was a feeling of needing to fix the planet, of like the planet is broken and I need to do my part to fix it. And I kind of had that mindset as a conservationist, as somebody who cares deeply about the planet and the well-being of the planet, right? And even the term rewilding in ecology is a term that we use to kind of bring back nature's natural state, right? To kind of bring back that. And the reason I say it's inner rewilding is because we're coming back to our natural state, and the recognition that our natural state is actually already at peace and already whole, that's intrinsic within us, and we're all collectively remembering, in a sense, our own purity. This is a deeply Buddhist philosophy, right? That our natural state and our natural mind is pure and untainted, and our hearts are pure. And so is nature. So nature's not broken, and we don't need to fix her. And shifting that mindset and coming back to fall in love, in essence, it's a path of falling in love with ourselves as we are, not as something that needs to be fixed, which is a path of falling in love with the earth as she is, that doesn't need to be fixed. So when we step out of the I need to fix it mindset and into the beauty that's already here, then everything shifts and we feel a connection. It's actually the feeling of fixing, that's the frequency that's actually getting in the way of our connection. So the moment we turn that into love and appreciation and seeing the beauty of what's here, we actually start to create a world that is the beauty we long for.
I think again it is very interesting because when we go through life and it's really so hectic and there's so many things that we need to pay attention to and stuff, so it's interesting because it feels like we need to have things kind of in a perfect way. Like I said, can you trust the land? And you want to fix it, and actually what you are saying is that really that's just a myth. You don't have to wait for things to be perfect. You don't need to have everything perfect at the same time. You can start somewhere and allow for things to unfold. And I think it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing because we don't often think about, hey, that can be a journey into getting back to ourselves, right? We want things, we think, right. Tends to think in all or nothing.
We do tend to think in all or nothing, yes. And so this is why I use this phrase that I'm just so fond of right now, the wild intelligence of being, because I feel that there's there is an incredible, like, nature is so deeply wise and intelligent, far more than our little minds could ever possibly understand. And so when we reconnect with that, this wild intelligence that's already here, and we start to listen and move from a mindset of I know to kind of unknowing and unlearning all the ways we've been taught, and then let that wisdom seep into our lives and into our bones and into our tissues. And it's organic, it's beautiful, and life becomes far more easeful and beautiful, is what I've found.
And so how was this journey for you when you realized that, yes, you already connected to the land in some way, but maybe not as you are now? What do you notice about you from before
What
versus
I
you
notice
at the
is
moment?
that, well, I'm much happier. So my baseline state, the way I describe it, it's like, and the work that I do is to really help people feel, it's like finding the ground that you never knew you had. So I don't feel lost anymore in that sense of feeling like there's no ground and I'm not quite sure where to go. And I'm humble. I'm still listening all the time. So I'm not trying to say, it's like an unknowing knowing. Like, I don't know, and I know that I don't know, and I'm listening, and I can reside in a place of kind of trusting certainty. I know these are kind of like oxymorons, but it's like deep trust and listening, that yields a place of settledness within my heart, because I don't feel this angst that I used to feel, and nervousness and stress about what's going to happen to the planet. And oh my God, it sort of felt before like the house was on fire and burning down, and somebody do something kind of feeling. And I don't feel that way anymore. I have this like deep trust in life and in the wisdom and the intelligence of nature and earth. And that if I just lean back into that and keep leaning, that it just kind of guides my life in a kind of flow. So it feels much more easeful. My life feels easeful and trusting, and I never had that before.
And so how was that
Yeah.
shift for your family, for example?
Well, they saw me completely upend my life. So they saw me leave my, safe job at the Nature Conservancy where I worked, and it was it served me so well, and I'm so grateful for it. But I left that. I did get a divorce, which my former husband and I are at really good terms. Like I, honor him deeply for, my children and for the life we had. So we're very good friends, and we even spend holidays together. So I don't feel that divorce is something that's wrong. I feel like it's just a chapter that ended, and and had its time, and now I'm in this chapter. So I did and I moved. I left my home in Wyoming and moved back to California. So like I did all the things that people do when their lives change. I literally left my place and my work to do this work and to be here now. So my life looks completely different, but on the outside and on the inside, it feels like this sort of hand of grace came down, and yeah, and I'm just in a much more easeful, peaceful place.
And how many of us can really say that? I mean, I must add it. Right? I mean, there's two things, right? The first of all is to know that there can be something else other than what we feel on a day-to-day basis, and then also to have the courage to really say, that's not serving me anymore, and I'm going to do what does. Right?
It's a big leap of faith, let me
Right.
tell you.
Amazing.
It was a big trust fall to leave, and and my Beautiful ex-husband at the time it was very unnerving for him that I wanted to leave my job. That was one of the things. And I understand, but I felt like I just had this feeling in like, I know what I have to do. And I believe that the universe will hold me in that. And I live my life by that conviction that if we feel deep in our hearts that this is what we need to do, the universe will hold us. And what I have found is that again and again, that's what happens,
And so this I'm going to say new discoveries, a new way of being. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
I begin my morning with a morning practice. So, and everyone I work with, I say, start there. Start with, mine's an hour, but start with 10 or 15 minutes, depending on what you have, to connect within and listen. So you have to start to create space in your life to connect. So I do that. And I go out and, I also greet the planet, I step outside my home and I greet the sun, and I'm blessed to live in a forest now, and I walk through the forest, unless it's pouring rain, but it's about, taking some time to connect and time for myself each morning. So, and I recognize I raised 2 children. I understand that, it's hard to create that space, but I have to say, even when when I was going through this transition, I've always, even when my daughters were teeny and I hadn't made all the shifts I'm talking about now, but I did take time every morning to light a candle and then I would read. But, my daughters knew that when they got up, Mom was going to be, with a candle in the living room reading. And they adapted to that. And so, there are ways to, and I'd get up before them just to make that time for myself. So, begin your day as a ceremony. It is. Our lives are ceremonies. Every day is a ceremony. So treat it that way, and it's like self-respect and giving space for that. And same with the end of the day. Create some kind of, even if it's just a short gratitude practice of, I love to just spend the last 10 minutes, even just laying in bed, recalling the things I'm grateful for that day, and then it's about checking in. It's like minding your relationships and paying attention to, we're in relationship all the time with everyone. So I'm also in my life, while I'm looking on the outside, I've got 80% of my eyes on the inside. How am I feeling? And if something doesn't feel right, I don't ignore it. It's a message, and I listen to it, and I move from that place of stopping and listening, And I also have very much a mindset of everything's a gift, so that, and I know I'm sort of treading beyond what may seem like relevant topics, but actually it's all connected, right? So I move with a sense of whatever's showing up for me. If something happened that seemed, you might have labeled bad or not good, I immediately flip it in my mind to, what's the message for me? Why is this here? And how can I treat this as a sacred teaching for myself? I never wallow in victimhood. I'm always flipping it to, I called this in. Why is this here? And I laugh at the universe, and I mean, okay, universe, that's funny that you did that to me today. That's hilarious. I talk to the universe. When I get a parking spot, I'm like, thank you, God. I really talk to the universe in a way of I'm in relationship all the time. One of the shamans I worked with in Peru said, everything is an oracle, everything. The clouds in the sky, the bird passing overhead, the deer that crosses your path, everything, the universe is speaking to us all the time, and we're in relationship to it. So what I'm doing even more and more, because it never ends, is to just remember that we're in relationship and we can talk to it. And the more that you do that, the less isolated you feel. Guess what? You don't feel disconnected anymore. You're starting to build this connection with everything that's happening around you. And I find that deeply, I don't know. It feels really abundant and less alone and more in a conversation. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the fruit flies that I have here because of my plants. So I guess maybe not a deer that is fasting, but fruit
Yeah,
flies
there you go.
constantly.
What are they here telling you, right? Like it's really a very different way to be in the world, which indigenous teachings and practices have been every time I sort of listen to an indigenous person, they're talking about this. They're talking about how we're in relationship to everything around us. And the more that we see that and stop feeling like it's a me in here and a world out there, this is the source. I am convinced this is the source of our suffering and our pain. Is that?
Are we saying, are we kind of encouraging, really, like, I don't know, the word that comes to me is isolation, but I don't think I mean isolation. But is that what we kind of advocating here? Really moving away from that very busy life that takes away all of our, well, all of our, I don't know, time or energy or stress, or maybe puts more stress in and all of that, and actually really move to that place where we can really reconnect from scratch. Like, is that
Yeah.
what we are
in a way, I think yes.
getting to?
I think it is. But I also want to say that our lives can be busy. It's not that we stop doing. We have to stop doing. And, so I really want to emphasize this. Like, this isn't all of us, becoming, monks or something like that and just like living in the land. I mean, if you're called to do that, great. But it's not a prerequisite for what I'm talking about. So we can start to really be in conversation with the universe in a deeper way and within the context and the fabric of our lives. We don't need to abandon them, but we do need to feel places where we feel angst and we feel stress and start to listen to that, because everything's a message. So that pain that you feel is your greatest teacher, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I say the same thing. I really believe in that. And then I think also that it's very interesting that when you do actually pay attention to the way that you are feeling, be it emotions or physical pain or whatever it is, really, when you do take the time to ask yourself these questions, instead of shutting it out or ignoring it or saying, oh, I don't want to feel it that way or stuff like that. When we say, actually, yeah, what are you here to tell me? How come you are here? What is it that what is going on? When you're having different conversations with yourself, you do really get really interesting answers.
Exactly. So it's all of that. Absolutely. We start where we are, right? So like, we start with the relationships in our lives that aren't working or that feel like there's a lot of friction, and get curious about that friction and get curious about what's in there, what's created that, take responsibility for everything, right? Fundamentally, it's about taking responsibility for everything that's here in your life right now and owning it and saying, you called this in. Why did you call this in? What is here for me? And beginning to work with that. And also to not, like, when we take responsibility for something, it doesn't mean, it always also doesn't mean like we just have to stay in it and oh, well, if I'm in this marriage and it's not working, it's my fault and I just have to stay in it and figure it out. That doesn't mean that too, in the sense that, like, I really came to the feeling of this person's energy is about this, and this is what he's, where he's really his frequency, and this is my frequency, and actually we're not going in the same place anymore, and that's okay too. So it can mean that people fall out of your lives in a beautiful conscious uncoupling as well, so it's a deep honoring of who you are and what you're, where your unfolding path feels like it's going. So it's so about falling in love with who you are and your path and honoring that, and letting things, part if they're not serving you anymore. It's that too, right?
But I think it's a very interesting question, I think, for exactly that. So let's move away the first step of, I guess, victimhood, which a lot of the time people do feel, right? Why is it happening to me? And then sometimes when we say, you brought it, they'll say it's my fault, but it's not about what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the bigger picture of how come. I always say that, how come it's happening for me right now? That's my question. But how do we help people? So I guess there are levels to all of this kind of inner questioning, but a lot of the time people recognize that something is not working out. Maybe it's the wrong partner, maybe it's no money, maybe it's health, maybe it's, all of these different things. So they recognize that something is not working for them. How do we move them from that place to say, okay, yeah, of course I can leave. I can, there's the either or, the black and white kind of thing. But how do we help them really to see that there is a message, or that they don't have to leave, they can maybe walk it out, or how?
Yeah.
What is that?
I mean, I do a lot
step
of
for
deep
them?
somatic work with my clients and have with myself. So the tools that I love to use are, breath work, and as a somatic, what I have found is, like in the breath work, for example, that I guide, though you'll start to receive a deeper message of what's happening through that somatic work, or like I do a sort of a kind of somatic healing work, and I work with plant medicine too, and I guide and support people in working with plant medicine, and all of those can help uncover those deeper messages. So I want to be clear too. I've had a lot of teachers and a lot of support. This is not something that I figured out on my own, not at all. I had a whole bunch of people who have supported and helped me. And so I guess what feels worthy of saying right now is to get support. There's so many different beautiful people who are there, who are supporting each other in that kind of work. And to, you may or may not feel called to plant medicine. It doesn't have, some people are, some people aren't, or to breath work. You just go where your sort of soul feels guided. And this is about learning to feel what, that inner resonance, that inner yes of, oh, that person and that teaching really moved me. Okay, great. Go deeper in that. Actually look them up and, do a session, like just, or go to a retreat or whatever it is. But it is about like investing in your health and well-being. I have invested quite a bit in this, in times when, it wasn't easy for me to do. I didn't feel like I had a lot of money to do a certain thing, but I was like, I know that I need this and I'll find a way. And so resourcing, the people around you and the places to get support and help.
And I like what you're saying, really. The first thing you said when I brought up this question was, about somatic work and meditation and really going within. And that's, again, something that, of course, a lot of people are already using meditations and so on, but also to bring in this quietness, to start being curious and saying, hey, I don't have to ask people external people for their advice and so on. You can absolutely go and get your help if you need to. But it's also about trusting that you actually do know what is right for you. And if you quiet enough all this noise around you, there's some, so, some of the best thing will come from inside.
That's right. And, this is ultimately about maybe we're going to come full circle back to where we started. It's ultimately about being able to hear that intelligence within, which is this reconnection, learning to hear those intuitive voices within the feel, and not just hear, but feel. I'm a feeler, and I like to emphasize this because I don't actually see like visions like some people do, but I feel. I have this like inner feeling, knowing. And so just being aware that your intuition comes in different ways. It can come as a knowing, it can come as a feeling. Some people see things. However it comes to you, don't ignore it. Like, actually, that's a message from spirit, source, God, divine, whatever you want to call it. That's the universe speaking to you. And I just did a lot of following where I felt guided to go, which when I say that, I mean, I felt a kind of inner, like, ooh, that feels like that's for me. And I want to be clear, like other teachers would come along and they were saying like really wise things, but I'd also feel very clearly like, no, that's not my teacher. Like that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's not mine. Yeah. So Holly, let's talk a little bit more about your book, and maybe we can start with maybe a little.
I would love that. I would love that. So. Yeah, I would just want to say my book is it's part memoir and it's part spiritual guidebook, and I do both. And at the beginning, I really tell my journey, and then in the end, I offer kind of 4 principles that really guided my journey. And yeah, maybe we can talk about those in a minute. But yeah, okay. What we've lost is the sacred understanding of interbeing. That nothing exists in isolation, and that every action, every thought ripples through the fabric of life. When we forgot this, we become numb to our impact and blind to the ways we belong to everything. When I say we are nature, I don't mean it as a poetic statement or in purely material terms. I mean it in the most literal sense. We are inseparable from everything we perceive. The universe is one interconnected organism. When we retain a sense of inseparability, we feel a deep-rooted belonging and acceptance that cannot be undone. We love and accept ourselves, each other, and the earth wholly, fully, and completely. Modernity thrives on our forgetting. When we remember, the jig is up. The systems that rely on our disconnection, the ones feeding off our numbness, lose their power. This journey taught me to become wildly intimate with my own nature. Through this intimacy, I rediscovered the love and beauty that are my essence. I saw what has always been true. The world is already whole, beautiful, and made of love. I don't need to fix it. I can let go of desperately trying to repair everyone and everything.
I absolutely love it. And I agree. It's sometimes I hear myself say when people are so, feeling bogged down with problems and situations, it is that, really go back to simplicity, right? It's so simple. It doesn't have to be so complicated. And you say it so brilliantly. So maybe would you like to share a little bit about the 4 pillars you mentioned?
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to say, right, it doesn't have to be so complicated. This is about taking care of ourselves and each other in very basic ways. So, this can look like, making a special trip to visit a parent who's aging that, just wants connection, or making phone calls, to them. It's like paying attention to the people around us and the lives around us and being attuned to, where you would where you'd most be served, but in a way that feels nourishing and supportive to you. Not, I know so many people are stuck in like a give, 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 give mentality. But the moment that we start to nourish ourselves and to really tend to our own needs, I say so often, this is a put on your own oxygen mask first situation. Like, really start to pay attention to nourishing yourself and receiving nourishment from the earth. And what you'll find is that when you do that, you resource yourself in a way that you then can start to reciprocate back in a way that feels aligned for you, whatever that is, So,
it is interesting though that you say that, because of course there's a gap, isn't it, between, if you say, for example, people
very
pleasing,
common. Right.
that's so very cool, very common. So we say, okay, here's some tools, some ideas how to maybe do things differently, and so quickly it's like, oh, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how to do it, and then there's overthinking, and then there's like, but of course, what we are saying is, go with your feeling, go with your guts, and trust that.
Yeah.
So
come back and find your own energy
You
first.
find the
So many
path.
people are enmeshed in everybody else's energy. They don't even know who they are, right? And so this is why meditation and taking time to walk and be alone, to find out who you are first, and go, really feel your own energy, and then it's not so muddled, right? And then you have the resources to serve. I have a disabled brother, and he calls me a lot, and and it used to be sort of, I'd feel he'd call and I'd sort of feel, oh my God, my brother again calling, right? But the more space I made for myself, and the more I kind of take care of my life in such a way that I'm not in a constant scarcity of time, resources, and energy, like magically I have time for my brother in different ways. And I started to take him out to lunch once a week. I can't now because I don't live where he was, but it was like, I don't know, it just, I started to see that these certain relationships that were important, I had time for them in a way I didn't have before. And then it felt really good, because I knew that the right thing to do was to take my brother out to lunch once a week. It was like, actually, that's really, like, that is the way I can be of really great service to him in this small way. So, but we can't do those things if we feel like our lives are on fire. The 4 pillars are awaken, attune, allow, and align. Let me just expand on that. And I put them in a mandala of 4 directions. So awaken is in the east, attune is in the south, allow is in the west, and align is in the north. And the first one is awaken to peace. So this is this basic awakening to the peace of your true nature, that you are in your essence. Peace is here. It's already our natural state. And it's not something we have to get. It's actually something we kind of fall back into. And that's a lot of the work I do. Meditations are around that, around finding the peace of our true nature. And then attune is just what we've been talking about, attuning to the energetics of the universe, starting to listen and come in relationship with the messages that are coming through, and taking time to recognize we're all like radios. And we can start to attune to that inner intelligence of the universe, and how to do that. Allow is the surrender path, which is so essential in spiritual texts. It's that trustful that actually my life is being held by something much greater than myself. And if I can surrender into that, and stop thinking I know, it's the unknowing. If I can stop thinking I know, that's really where the grace of spirit comes in. And then the 4th is aligned to our wild heart. And once we awaken to the peace of our true nature, and we attune to the messages, and we allow the surrender, then we can like align our wild heart. We can start to move in, this is the moving with grace from a place of connectedness and resourced and feeling like we're aligned to our purpose. It's like that's really living your purpose. Yeah, but it's hard to do those things until you awaken and attune and allow.
I think it's brilliant. I think you say it in such a brilliant way, and it's really inviting people to pause and to question, right? Like, where am I? What do I do? How do I do? Am I doing that? In my life, in my struggles, in my all of these different things. So I mean, I'm really looking forward to reading the book. I'm very excited about that. But maybe
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can
So
share
here's the
your
book.
cover so that people
Yeah.
can.
The artwork
Is
is,
that
no,
the
it's from an
artwork is
artist
yours
in
as well?
Romania. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
very beautiful.
those four pillars, I mean, they were sort of channeled through me, but what I was trying, I was in this space of the book. I didn't know, actually the book's title was something different when I set out to write it. So this came through me as I was searching, as I was telling my story, like, how do I communicate the essential things that happened to me in a way that somebody could follow, that I could help somebody understand, how do I distill this into the most essential truths? And out of that came inner rewilding and the four pillars.
Thank you.
It's
Very good
just
choice.
was listening, right? It wasn't me. She came through, and when she did, I was like, oh, that's it. I knew, right? So I've just the grace of God coming through. When I finally got my figuring mind out of the way, which it was, there was a time when it was trying to figure it out. I do a lot of running, and I was out on the trail running, and it
Yeah,
dropped
yeah.
in.
And tell me, Holly, so what is the dream for where you are now and
I
where you
love
are
that.
headed?
What is the
What is
dream?
next?
You know, the dream is to listen. It's really to share this message with whoever needs to hear it. And I'm working on a TED Talk, and I'm following the breadcrumbs to just create a platform. I have a Substack channel if people are on Substack. I have a subscription there. So I'm just trying to build a community of people and a place where I can support them in inner rewilding and really build that framework so that as many people as want to follow this kind of guidance and get support, I can support. So I'm just in the process now of building all that. But if you go to Substack, you'll find where I'm really starting to share those meditations and those teachings very deliberately and actively.
Lovely, lovely. So, of course, for everyone watching, listening, all of your information, contact details, and all of that will be in the show notes. So people are very much welcome to get in touch, follow you, and interact, and just breathe in everything that you have to share. And I guess that's kind of bringing us to the end of our conversation. Holly, it was a pleasure to have you here again. Thank you so much for joining us and for
Thank you,
sharing
Anav. Thank you
where you
so
are in
much
the
for
journey.
having me on. I'm really deeply grateful. And thank you to everybody who's listening. And, reach out. I would love to connect with you if this resonates. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.